No doubt last night Tamara Lich was arrested for daring to take a photo with a persona non grata. As a representative of this government, do you feel that this is an appropriate use of both financial and judicial resources? And are you troubled that an Albertan is being hauled away to Ottawa as a political prisoner for being an ideological objector?
So I don't know the specifics of what's taken place last night in regards to any issue that's before the court. I don't know the specifics. What I will say is that there certainly are concerns from the Alberta government in the approach that the Prime Minister took in the use of the Emergency Measures Act, something that Alberta made clear at the time.
Adam Sos here for Rebel News, and I am on location at the McDougall Centre here in Calgary, where Finance Minister Jason Nixon is breaking down the results of the 2021-2022 budget. That budget, which came up to a wrap on March 31st, actually saw a surplus of $3.9 billion. It was actually originally forecast to have a deficit, so that is good news. Alberta, as I mentioned, once again back in the black. This is very likely related more so to sort of market success and increased oil prices than anything necessarily the government is doing, but good news nonetheless. The government does plan to invest quite a bit of this money into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, not to splurge. They want to be, let's say, conservative and plan for the future, because as oil prices come down, they will need that money at that time. So no big Ralph Bucks announcement today. I was fortunate enough to ask a couple questions of Minister Nixon about the troubling developments with the arrest of Tamara Lich last night in fact, and the ongoing use of government resources to persecute and target conscientious objectors to unconstitutional vaccine mandates. So we're going to jump now to some of the footage of the budget update, the results of that budget, and Minister Jason Nixon's response to those questions.
And a lot has happened in the province and frankly around the world since we released Budget 2021 16 months ago. At that time, the global economy was slowly emerging from one of the worst downturns in history. Leading up to Budget 2021, West Texas Intermediate was trading between $40 and $50 a barrel US. That was actually way up from 2020, when the price dipped below $0 at its worst. So for the budget, we based the budget on oil prices of 46 US per barrel. A few more stats to give you an idea of how volatile oil prices can be. On April 1st, 2021, the price of West Texas Intermediate was almost 62 US per barrel. 1 year later, on April 1st, 2021, or 2022, I should say, WTI was almost 102 US per barrel, an increase of 65% over 1 year. We haven't seen prices this high since 2014. With this in mind, we're releasing our year-end results that show Budget 2021 was successful in meeting its goals of setting Alberta up for economic growth and prosperity, while also continuing to respect taxpayer dollars, build our savings, and reduce our debt. For the 2021-22 year, we brought in $68.3 billion in revenue and spent $64.4 billion to support public services, including helping Albertans and the healthcare system through the pandemic and into recovery. In the end, that means Alberta's government ended the fiscal year with a surplus of $3.9 billion compared to the $3.4 billion deficit forecasted at the end of the third quarter. Over half of the reported surplus, more than $2 billion, is due to a partial reversal of the onerous contract provision for the Sturgeon refinery, as the Minister of Energy renegotiated a better deal for Alberta with a new ownership framework. The remaining portion of the surplus is due to several key factors. Alberta's government made strategic spending decisions based on responsible fiscal management, offering targeted funding so ministers could provide services Albertans need. Second, the economy bounced back and saw growing investment in our province as many sectors expanded inside Alberta. Investors were attracted by the job creation tax cut and by the Alberta government's diversification efforts to support sector growth in technology, film, agri-food, hydrogen, carbon capture projects, and other sectors outside of oil and gas. Strategic decisions also resulted in higher revenues. The value of the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund is at its highest ever, with a fair market value of $18.7 billion as of March 31st, 2022. We earned $1.95 billion investment income from the fund over the fiscal year, bringing its total investments to $20 billion. This fund is a source of pride and security in Alberta. We're making sure it continues to benefit all of those who live here in our great province. Its earnings contribute to Alberta's government's revenue and represents a resource for the future, for future generations. We retained $705 million in earnings within the fund to protect its value from inflation. This is the largest amount retained in the Heritage Fund for this purpose in a single year. We are now looking to amend legislation to allow more of the Heritage Fund's investment earnings to be kept in the fund in the future. This will help the Heritage Fund weather the ups and downs of commodity prices and help fund key services like healthcare and education from future fund earnings. In total, revenue from 2021-2022 was $68.3 billion, which is $24.6 billion more than was forecasted in budget 2021. Alberta's government collected more in personal income taxes as the labor market strengthened. It's important to note that Albertans continue to pay by far the lowest taxes overall than other provinces.
So some headline news, no doubt, last night Tamara Lich was arrested for daring to take a photo with a persona non grata. As a representative of this government, do you feel that this is an appropriate use of both financial and judicial resources? And are you troubled that an Albertan is being hauled away to Ottawa as a political prisoner for being an ideological objector?
So I don't know the specifics of what's taken place last night in regards to any issue that's before the court. I don't know the specifics. What I will say is that there certainly are concerns from the Alberta government in the approach that the Prime Minister took in the use of the Emergency Measures Act, something that Alberta made clear at the time. And I know today that the Premier and Minister Shandro have announced that there will be an inquiry into the use of that act, and I think that's where our focus as a government is, to understand what has taken place and to be able to get answers for Albertans in regards to their concerns and the government's concerns about the Prime Minister's actions when it comes to the Emergency Measures Act. But specifically, as for some of this before the courts, I don't know the issues.
As a follow-up, the ongoing AHS legal efforts on some of these matters are no doubt costing a fortune and are very often yielding legal losses. Will the government of Alberta ever stop wasting massive amounts of resources on the ongoing persecution of unconstitutional mandate objectors?
So, again, issues before the court, I'd refer you to Mr. Shandro, who would be better briefed to answer them. But this government has committed to a full and fulsome review of AHS and the total response to the COVID-19 pandemic. That's something that I support. I think needs to take place so that we can understand what's taken place during the response to the pandemic, and to be able to make sure that future generations will be able to adjust to the learnings of what's taken place over the last 2 years during the pandemic.
And if I may, just because this is obviously pressing, is there a timeline on that? Because people are being hauled away as we speak.
Again, I would refer you to Mr. Coppian and to Mr. Shandro on how that will roll out. But I will continue to call for a proper review of how the government responded to COVID-19, including Alberta Health Services.
Well, there you have it. Some good news for the first time in a long time on the budgetary front. We did also hear that commitment that there would be a formal inquiry and investigation into the use of the Emergencies Act. Unfortunately, not a very strong commitment in terms of action, as Tamara Lich has now been taken into custody and is very likely to be taken away to Ottawa to likely spend a lot more time behind bars. All of this for daring to protest the government, daring to ask tough questions, and ultimately the latest arrest for daring to take a photo with somebody, persona non grata, a political dissident. Apparently that's enough to get you hauled halfway across the country and thrown back in jail. Hopefully we will have meaningful action. Hopefully the government of Alberta not only will have good news on this black books front, they will have good news as far as standing up for their citizens and standing up against the overreach of politicians and police in Ontario. As always, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Sos. The race for the leadership of the United Conservative Party of this province moving forward will very much determine the course of Alberta, whether that be a loss to the NDP and crippling taxes and policies, or a new affirmation of Alberta's rights and sovereignty under strong leadership. It remains to be seen, but if you want to get all of the reports on that front and make an informed decision when it comes to vote for the leader of the UCP, go to ucpleadership.com.